What do you know about blood glucose and insulin? Do you think it's just something that diabetics deal with, or do you know that it's a problem for some 90% of Americans? Meaning, it's probably a problem for you. Do you understand how it all works? If not, or even if you just need a refresher, this episode is going to spell it out for you and help you understand how something so seemingly simple might be the very thing that's undermining your health day by day. Let's go. Review time. This week's review comes from MFAB. I always sound funny about those names because I don't really know what they mean, and you guys make them up and probably don't even remember what they are, but it is what it is. MFAB from back in June. Title says, Wonderful podcast. This podcast is exactly what I've needed to hear. So many helpful tips, enlightening perspectives, and encouraging words. So happy to see how God is using her to reach mamas and touch lives. Thanks for giving back to all your listeners. And thank you for that review. It is an honor to me to be able to talk to you guys. It's an honor that God has given me this platform. I'm thankful for it. There's so many people that I've been able to be connected with as a result of this. And I'm just so thankful that God has given me this platform to talk to you guys. So thank you for that review. And if you haven't left me a review yet, please hop over on Apple Podcasts, leave me a quick 5-star written review. Helps me so much, encourages me so much. Or if you don't have an Apple product, that's fine. Hop over on YouTube and subscribe and maybe comment on a video or two. That helps me in the exact same way because it helps me to find other mamas like you who are looking for this kind of content just like you are. Okay, so today we're going to dive right in. Today's episode is all about insulin and glucose and kind of understanding how all this works, because at the root of so many of our problems in America, it is a problem with insulin resistance. Whether you realize it or not, you may be in the early stages, you may be in the late stages, you may not have a clue which stage you're in. There are very, very, very few of us in America who are not dealing with this on some level because of the way that our foods are so sugar laden. And they may not say sugar on the label, but the way that your body processes the food is the same as basically if you just took a teaspoon of sugar and just ate it, okay? And we're not going to get into that. We're not going to get into what foods cause this to happen. That's for a different day. Today, I just want to help you to kind of understand how this whole cascade works, how your body works physiologically through this, and why it can impact your health so badly. So not badly, yeah, badly, but so much. How come it can cause such a big impact, okay? So first of all, what is blood glucose? Blood glucose is the glucose that is in your blood. Makes sense, right? But glucose itself is the most basic part of what you eat. If you just eat sugar, that's basically glucose. Simple sugars go straight in this way. They spike your blood sugar really fast because there is very little your body has to do to be able to use it. That's good and bad. If you are unconscious because your blood sugar has dropped so far, then that quick, simple sugar is a good thing. But that's about the only time it's a good thing. Usually, you need more complex sugars to give your body other things that it needs. So simple sugars that you get from things like candies or from white bread, crackers, all the things that are made from just plain white flour, pasta, all these kind of things that are not whole grain. These all get broken down very quickly into glucose. The glucose goes from your digestive tract into your blood and causes the level of glucose in your blood glucose, to rise, okay? Complex carbs and proteins also get broken down into glucose for the cells to use. It's just that these things are used in a way that bring much more nutrition to your body in the process. And glucose is not bad. Glucose is essential. It's like gas in the tank of your cells. It's the fuel that helps them to do their jobs. Every single part of your body, if you remember last week we touched on this, every single thing in your body is made up of cells at its most basic level. And all of those cells need glucose to do whatever job it is they're designed to do. But it needs to be at an appropriate level, not at the level that the American diet usually gives us. Glucose is a bad guy per se when it's in too high of a concentration, too much. But it's not the only problem. The real villain is actually insulin. Now, If you go back to your high school health classes, you learned about insulin a little bit. You probably learned it the same way I did. I learned that insulin is kind of like the car that takes the glucose, it picks up the glucose, it carries it in the back, and it drives it into the cell. It's the way that sugar gets into the cell for the cell to be able to have what it needs to have the fuel it needs, right? And that's true. Insulin is essential. But, well, before I go to that, let me regroup here. Insulin is essential. And if you have something like type 1 diabetes, your pancreas just doesn't make insulin anymore. And in that case, you actually have to take insulin. You have to give yourself injections of insulin into your body so that the sugar can get from your blood into your cells. If you don't, you will die. Because the sugar, the glucose, just stays in your bloodstream and it never gets into the cells where it needs to be for your body to use it. So again, insulin is essential. However, when it is in levels that are too high for too long, it becomes a problem. See, when you eat food, a signal is sent to your pancreas to release that insulin so that glucose, obviously, if you haven't gathered, the pancreas is where the insulin's made. So it sends this signal so that the insulin will come out into your blood to pick up all that glucose to carry it into the cells so that the cells can again do their job. That then brings your blood glucose level back down to a normal level. See, there's always glucose in your blood because you've always got cells that need to be able to access it when they need it. But it needs to be at a certain relatively low level, usually somewhere around 80, 90-ish. Depends on a lot of things, but usually in the 80s or 90s is where the healthy level of your blood sugar needs to stay. If it gets much lower than that, you start feeling funny and feeling bad, and that's when your body has to burn other things to create more glucose if you haven't eaten. So there is a healthy level that we need to keep all the time. But when we are eating the typical American diet, which gives us far more sugar than we ever need, because by the way, if you're wondering, the amount of added sugar that you need in your diet, that means anything that you add to cause it to be sweet that breaks down to glucose, the amount of added sugar that we need in our diet is 0. And if you look at nearly any food label, you're going to see high fructose corn syrup or sugar or just corn syrup or something like that, something that's made it a little bit sweeter. And all of those things, along with, again, the white flours and the junk food that is all breaking down, it's basically simple sugars. All of those things cause your glucose level to stay high longer. Okay? When your glucose levels are high because of a sustained high glucose level, guess what else is high? That's right, your insulin. Your insulin level is going to also stay high. And sustained high insulin levels are what leads to insulin resistance because the cells are seeing insulin all the time and they kind of get tired of it and they stop paying attention to it. Okay, you can probably make some analogies about, like, when your kids, you try to tell your kids, maybe don't say everything that comes into your head, because if you talk all the time, nobody listens, right? Only talk when you have something worth hearing, don't just chatter all the time. And okay, this is not an episode about parenting, but you know what I mean. Like, if you're just always chattering, people kind of tend to make you background noise. Your cells do the same thing. They see insulin all the time. Their receptors are already flooded, and they just kind of start to ignore the insulin. And so over time, when your insulin level stays high because your glucose level stays high, then your cells become more and more resistant, less and less sensitive to insulin. The more insulin resistant your cells become, the more insulin then it's going to take to clear the glucose. The amount of insulin that used to work for a certain glucose load doesn't work anymore. You need more now, which leads to higher and higher insulin levels, which causes more and more resistance. You see where I'm going with this? It is a self-propagating thing, and it just keeps going and it keeps going and it keeps going, and it eventually leads to prediabetes. And then type 2 diabetes, which is both of those really are just degrees of the same thing, which is insulin resistance. The excess insulin takes, here's where insulin becomes a problem, by the way, with you losing weight. The excess insulin in your body, it takes that excess glucose and it stores it as fat in your body. It sees all this extra and it's like, oh, we don't need to let that go. We need to save it. And that is why it is so hard for so many people to lose weight. That's why exercise doesn't feel like it moves the needle if it's done wrong. Because you can't out-exercise a diet that is setting up those conditions. When you have eaten a diet that has kept your glucose level too high, which has kept your insulin level too high for too long, your body is now storing the glucose that used to would have gone into your cells. It's now just staying in your bloodstream long enough to where the insulin is now storing it as fat, and you can't get rid of it because all those cells that where it's storing it, they're all insulin resistant. You see, you have set yourself up for a situation where you can't lose the weight unless you break the cycle. Now, let me help you understand how come so many of you think you're healthy until all of a sudden it's too late. Okay? When you go to your doctor for maybe your annual visit, usually you go in and they draw a few different labs maybe every year, and inside of one of those labs, even if you don't see that they're ordering a glucose, inside of one of those labs, a metabolic panel, there's going to be a glucose level. And that glucose level may be, quote, normal. They consider normal to be less than 100, okay? If your blood sugar is 99, they're going to tell you you're fine. If your fasting blood sugar, and this is fasting, by the way, this is when you come in and you have not had any food that morning. If your fasting blood sugar is 97, 98, they'll tell you you're fine. They won't tell you that you are already almost at the threshold of having prediabetes. Why won't they tell you that? Because on the lab results, it didn't flag. It didn't tell them this one's high. So they're like, oh, everything's fine because they just skimmed down it. There's no flags. Everything's good. They don't look to see that, ooh, this one's really close. And when you mix it with this one and that one and the other one, we've got an inflammation problem here. We've got an insulin resistance problem. We've got some oxidative stress going on, and all of these things are compounding. And by the time they come back next year or the next year, it's going to be over 100. And then, oh no, we're pre-diabetic. They don't tell you that right now, if you will stop and make some changes, you can start the reversal process. They don't even look at that. That's why you go to your annual visit and they tell you everything's fine. Nothing's wrong with you. And you still feel like junk. And you know something's not wrong or something's not right. And it's because you are already almost in the throes of prediabetes or maybe even type 2 diabetes, but your numbers aren't quite high enough. And so they don't tell you anything's wrong. See, labs that are typically drawn don't usually show the problem of insulin resistance until you're way into the process. The lab that actually would give you some real insight is never done. And even if you ask for it, they will tell you that maybe insurance won't pay for it, or they'll tell you there's no normal levels of it, so we don't really know how to interpret it. But the real level that you really need to know is your fasting insulin. Let's think about again what the job of insulin is. Its job is to take the glucose from your blood sugar, from your bloodstream, to take that glucose into your cells. If you have been fasting for 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours, there should be a very low normal level of glucose now, right? So there's no job for insulin at this point. So your fasting insulin should be very close to zero because there's no need for it right now. There's no need for it to be carried into your cells right now. So if you will test a fasting insulin level, you will see very quickly, do we have a problem with our insulin staying high because our blood sugars have been spiked so high that we made too much insulin and our cells are resistant. We're having to make more and more insulin, and now it's just hanging out for longer periods of time and storing fat, okay? If you're going to get your fasting insulin and it's over about 5, you've already got a little bit of a problem. If you're 10, 20, 30, you got a big problem. And the thing about it is that fasting insulin is high 10 to 15 years before your fasting glucose will ever flag as high. So that's 10 to 15 years that if they were looking at the right labs, you could be doing the things that would keep you from ever having the high fasting glucose. But they don't look at it because our medical system is a joke. See, your body will work hard for a long time. It'll keep on making that insulin. It'll keep on this process for many years until it just can't keep it up anymore. And that's when your fasting glucose finally spikes. That's when your body can't clear out the glucose at night anymore. And that's when you show up and now your fasting glucose is high, but you're already 10 to 15 years into the process of metabolic dysfunction by this point. And by the way, when I say dysfunction, I want you to know, I'm not saying that there is something inherently wrong with your body and it's dysfunctional. No, what I'm saying is that you caused the dysfunction. Your diet and your lifestyle led you to where you are. Don't freeze up there. If you haven't listened to last week's podcast yet, go back and listen to it because I address how just because something's not working right does not mean it's too late for you. When I tell you that your diet and lifestyle led to where you are right now, I am not saying, woe is you, you're done, there's nothing that you can do now. Absolutely not. In fact, I'm saying the opposite. Now is the time to make the changes. Go back and listen to last week if you haven't. But this is why this whole thing about not even looking at insulin and only looking at glucose, this is why type 2 diabetes or prediabetes, this is why they can be reversed because they are the result of diet and lifestyle. And when you remove the cause that leads to them with time and effort, the effect, which is the high sugar and the high insulin, will also be removed. It's just that you've got to understand what's going on, and then you've got to decide that you're willing to do the work to undo the damage that has been done, like I talked about last week. Don't be scared by this, though. Don't be scared and think this is so big. I'm already 10, 15 years into it. There's nothing I can do. Like I said last week, you can make a lot of progress really quickly with the right support. Remember, I held on to baby weight for 11 years across 3 pregnancies, and I had resigned myself to think that this is just how it's going to be. I decided there's really not much I can do about this. It's just what it's going to be. I've been exercising, nothing's happening, can't lose weight, blah, blah, blah. But guess what? I was wrong. I was wrong. I learned about insulin resistance. I tested myself because as a midwife, I can order my labs. So I tested myself. And it was very clear what my problem was. And I made some relatively simple changes. And I lost all of the extra 15 pounds I was carrying in 3 months. Everything changed in 3 months. And by the way, I think I've said this before, but that started in October. So we're looking at Thanksgiving in those 3 months and Christmas, and we went on vacation. And I still lost 15 pounds. And it wasn't that hard because once I learned how to eat, I learned how and when to exercise, I learned all these things. Suddenly it was like effortless, essentially. And not only that, I no longer felt sluggish and gross after meals because it turns out what we used to call that itis, that feeling you get after a big meal, that feeling like you just can't stay awake, that is not normal. It's your body trying to deal with the massive glucose load that just hit your bloodstream, and it's trying its best to keep up and do things with it, but because it's got so much work to do, it can't keep you awake anymore, and you need a nap while it deals with it. And what's interesting is since I've learned all this, if I eat a meal and I feel awful, and if I've got to see a continuous glucose monitor on, or if I just check it with a finger stick, if I check it, usually my blood sugar is high. Because I've given my body more than it needed and it can't keep up. And that's why I feel so tired. It's amazing. So if you're eating meals and you're feeling like garbage after your meal and you just can't hold your eyes open, I can almost guarantee you that you're dealing with insulin resistance. Turns out also that afternoon slump you're having where you just feel groggy and can't stay awake in the afternoon is also a result of the damage caused by inflammation and insulin resistance and oxidative stress and all these things that all play in together. I know I'm throwing big words around, but it all is lumped together. It's all part of the same monster. And it turns out when you deal with those things, you feel a lot better. Now, you hear me talk about continuous glucose monitors, and they are great. They tell you a lot of information, but I want you to know they only tell you the blood sugar. Okay? And I've told you that the sugar doesn't bump as early as the insulin does. Sugar is not the full story. But right now, the only thing that we can track continuously or in a real-time way is blood sugar. There's no way to test a real-time blood insulin. So either a continuous glucose monitor or a finger stick machine, just a traditional way of checking your blood sugar, is the only thing that we have that gives you right now. It tells you right now what's going on. And so because of that, it is a great tool to help you immediately understand how certain foods impact your blood sugar, which then gives you insight into what's happening with your insulin. It's really the only way you can get the right now picture. I use one quite often, one of the CGMs. I also have the finger stick machine that I'll use occasionally if I don't have a CGM on. But it's such a neat tool to help you understand how your body deals with the things that you were eating anyway and you thought maybe were good for you, and then you find out, oops, that one spikes my blood sugar. Maybe I should lay off of that or eat much less of it, mix it with a lot more protein and different things like this. And these are all things, by the way, that we go in depth in the coaching that I do. I don't want you to think, though, that glucose is the only problem. Again, I want you to start thinking in terms of, what does this food do to my insulin levels? Okay, what is my insulin doing as I'm eating? Think about how this food, whatever that food is going to impact your blood glucose, and then how much insulin your body's going to have to make to deal with the glucose load you're giving it. You can, of course, always try a CGM if you want to. You can see in real time when you use those what your blood sugar level is doing. You can also do the finger sticks, as I mentioned. You can learn a lot about what various foods are going to do to your blood sugar by looking at the glycemic index or the glycemic load of a particular food. You can just look that up on an internet browser. You can learn a lot about what to expect, or what you can kind of predict what's going to happen to your blood sugar. Again, a finger stick machine is also an option if you want to just kind of do the lesser invasive. It's just that then you have to prick your finger all the time, which is also no fun. There's lots of different options, lots of different ways to go about it. I do include a CGM as part of my coaching program, which we're going to talk about in a second. So just know that if you decided to become a part of my one-on-one coaching program, that's part of that's part of the program, because I want to help you learn how to look at the readings. What do they mean? How do you interpret them? It can be a little tough to sort through when you very first start. So I help you do that so you don't have to do it alone. So I just want to ask you, what about you? How many pounds are you hanging on to that you can't figure out why you can't lose them? How bad do you feel midday? How gross do you feel after meals? How worn out do you feel no matter how much you sleep? These are all things that can be fixed. And don't get me wrong, it's simple, but it's not easy. And what I mean is, it's not real complicated to make these changes. It's not real complicated to figure out. It's just that it's not easy at first, but it gets easier pretty quickly. Because once you learn how to get rid of the cravings, which we work on, once you learn how to make good decisions without having to fight with your willpower at every turn, it really isn't that hard at all. I'll give you an example. Okay. Today, as I'm recording this, my husband and I went to Cheddar's after church. It's Sunday afternoon when I'm recording this. Went to Cheddar's after church. And used to at Cheddar's, I would have gotten that big old pile of chicken fingers and fries. In fact, pretty much anywhere I went, I would have gotten chicken fingers and fries. I've just always loved chicken tenders or chicken fingers. And fries, of course. Everything's delicious. And I used to think of everything as a ketchup delivery mechanism, right? It's like I loved ketchup. I'd eat tons of it. Okay. So you can imagine, what my diet looked like. So we're sitting down to order, and I went there with salmon in mind. It's like, I just love their salmon. I was like, I'm going to go eat salmon. Ended up ordering a chicken and shrimp dish with broccoli, and I got a loaded potato, which is probably my worst choice on the plate, but that's what I chose. my husband chose the chicken fingers that I normally would have chosen. So this tells you that just because I make best choices doesn't mean he always does. But I digress. He's actually lost a whole bunch of weight as well, so we won't go into all that. He's made some good choices also, but today he didn't. And he looks at his plate and he goes, "Oh, I know I'm going to pay for this. Oh, I know I'm going to feel bad." And I thought, see, that feeling now for me, when I look at a menu, I skip right over the fried things because I don't want to feel that way anymore. And it's not worth it to me to feel that way. And so it's really not hard at all for me to make choices that are much healthier. And honestly, the only reason I chose the loaded potato was because there weren't that many other good choices. It was like carrots, but like I don't want to be hungry when I leave. So, he's at the point where he is willing to pay the price. I'm at the point where I don't want to pay the price anymore. I want to feel good. I don't want to feel groggy. I don't want to feel like garbage. And this is where you'll get. He hasn't necessarily made quite as many changes as I have. And with time, with learning how your body works, with learning how it feels to feel good, you will not have the same difficulty making the right choices. It's simple no matter what, but it's not always easy. But the longer you do it and the more support you have, the easier it gets. It's not as big of a mountain as you might think it is. So are you ready to lose that weight and to finally feel better? Are you ready to not have to struggle so much? Are you ready to feel good? Because, see, this is not just about getting healthy for you. It's about being the best wife you can be, the best mom you can be, the best friend you can be. It's about being an effective Christian. How can you work for the Lord when you have no energy left over, or when you're so busy being at the doctor's office trying to figure out what's wrong with you? This is about being the most healthy you that you can be so that while you are on this earth, you can be as effective as you can be. And if you're ready to do what it takes, not only to learn how to get well, but to actually do it and do it quickly, then hop over on Instagram, send me a DM or email me. Let's talk about how my one-on-one coaching program might be exactly what you need to finally make real change in your life that will not only change your life, but will also change the lives of your family and future generations. Because this doesn't stop with you. When you make these changes and you teach your kids about the changes and why they matter, and then they buy in because they understand how their bodies work, and then they make the same decisions for their families, this goes on and on and on. We are getting back to what generations before us used to know inherently, but that knowledge has been lost. And we're going to get back to that. And we're going to help our families to have a completely different reality than what the current generation has. It's all about getting back to working with God's design, not against it, giving your body what God designed it to need and what God designed it to eat so that it can function the way He designed it to function. Because when you do that, your body will work the way He designed it to work. And it is a beautiful design. I hope that's helped you today. Meet you right back here next week.